The morning sun shone brightly on the quiet courtyard of the high school just days before the grand graduation ceremony. Students laughed and walked together in pairs, eagerly discussing their bright futures and upcoming university lives. Desung adjusted his heavy backpack alone, feeling a deep sense of exclusion from his energetic peers. Suddenly, the solid concrete beneath his worn-out sneakers began to vibrate violently without warning. A massive, pitch-black void tore open directly underneath his feet, swallowing his entire body instantly. He plummeted through an endless suffocating darkness that stripped away all his senses of direction. Desung crashed violently onto a jagged, scorching surface of hard volcanic rock. The unbearable stench of burning sulfur and old blood immediately filled his burning nostrils. Huge lakes of bubbling crimson lava stretched infinitely across the desolate, ruined landscape. A sudden, terrifying notification screen materialized dynamically in the air right before his eyes. The system text coldly announced his official entry into the lowest, deadliest depths of hell. A deep, guttural growl echoed from behind a nearby mound of sharp, broken bones. A monstrous hellhound stepped forward slowly, its glowing eyes locking instantly onto the frail human boy. Desung scrambled backward frantically on all fours, his school uniform tearing against the sharp stones. The beast lunged forward with terrifying speed, its massive jaws snapping precisely where he had been lying. Adrenaline surged through Desung's veins as his primitive survival instincts completely overrode his paralyzing fear. He tightly gripped a sharp, broken volcanic rock with both of his bloodied hands. With a wild, desperate scream, he plunged the jagged stone deep into the monster's glowing eye. The creature howled in agonizing pain as dark, boiling blood sprayed across Desung's pale face. Another holographic window flashed brightly, confirming his first official kill and awarding him experience points. He collapsed to his knees onto the burning soil, realizing that this was merely the true beginning of his nightmare. Days bled into long, agonizing weeks as Desung roamed the endless desolation searching for any source of water. He quickly learned to feed on the toxic, bitter flesh of the very demons he managed to slaughter. The demonic meat burned his throat terribly, but it slowly altered his physical body over several years. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye, and his once fragile physique transformed into a lean weapon. The system constantly gave him brutal daily survival quests that forced him to fight without a single rest. He dashed into the charging monster horde, swinging his bone sword with fluid, practiced precision. By the 30-year mark, emotion had completely drained from his eyes, leaving only the cold instinct of a predator. His overall level scaled up to heights that the system itself struggled to properly quantify. He encountered massive fortress cities built entirely by the elite, ancient factions of the underworld. Desung breached the heavy iron gates alone, challenging entire armies of armored demon soldiers. Every swing of his hardened blade sent massive shockwaves that instantly obliterated columns of enemies. 50 years of constant battle had completely forged his mind into something far more terrifying than any demon. He realized that the ultimate key to escaping this eternal torment lay at the absolute peak of the hellscape. With silent determination, he began his long ascent toward the domain of the supreme ruling entities. The air grew immensely heavy, threatening to crush his bones with pure, unadulterated, malicious pressure. He simply smirked, unleashing his own massive golden hunter aura to completely shatter the enemy pressure. At the absolute peak of the world, a colossal portal made of ancient, twisted roots waited silently. Suddenly, the sky split completely wide open, revealing a monstrous eye that glared directly down at his insolent form. The monstrous eye staring down from the shattered sky pulsed with a sickening cosmic malice. Desung gripped his jagged blade tightly as the oppressive pressure threatened to crush his very bones. A blinding flash of pure white light suddenly erupted directly beneath his heavily scarred feet. The demonic landscape began to dissolve into a chaotic vortex of swirling geometric energy panels. An excruciating sensation of spatial distortion ripped through every single muscle fiber in his body. The roar of burning demons faded instantly into an absolute ringing silence. A soft, rhythmic, and mechanical ticking sound slowly began to penetrate his consciousness. Desung slowly forced his heavy, crusty eyelids open against the harsh sting of fluorescent light. Instead of a blood-red sky, he saw a pristine white ceiling made of textured acoustic tiles. He immediately tried to leap up into a defensive combat stance out of sheer instinct. Sharp needles and plastic IV tubes violently yanked against the pale skin of his forearms. His legs felt completely hollow, utterly lacking the divine strength he had cultivated in the abyss. A sleek, holographic system window suddenly manifested right before his bewildered face. The text floating in the air read, "Welcome back to Earth, Survivor Desung." He stared intently at the words, his mind struggling to process the reality of his return. The door to the room creaked open slowly, revealing an older woman carrying a plastic bag. The plastic bag slipped entirely from her hand, spilling cheap juice boxes across the linoleum floor. Her eyes widened to their absolute limits as a flood of tears immediately spilled over. She fell heavily to her knees, weeping hysterically while calling out his name over and over. Desung reached out a weak hand, completely stunned by how much older his mother looked. He remembered her as a vibrant woman, but now her hair was heavily streaked with silver gray. After the doctors rushed in, they began executing a series of rapid medical examinations. The lead doctor stared at his medical tablet, completely unable to comprehend the miraculous recovery. He softly explained to Desung that he had been inside a deep coma for 10 full years. Desung calculated the timeline rapidly, realizing 80 hellish years there equaled only 10 years here. The doctor further revealed that the entire world had drastically shifted during his long sleep. Mysterious gates had opened across the globe, unleashing monsters and creating superhuman hunters. Society had reorganized itself entirely around these powerful high-ranking dungeon raiders. While listening, Desung noticed his mother quietly hiding her bruised wrists beneath her sleeves. Her posture was incredibly tense, constantly glancing toward the door as if expecting an attack. Once the medical staff finally left the room, an absolute silence settled between them. He gently but firmly grabbed her arm, sliding the worn fabric back to expose the injuries. She immediately broke down again, admitting that a loan shark syndicate had been tormenting her. Keeping him alive on life support for 10 years had cost an astronomical sum of money. Criminal thugs had taken complete advantage of her desperation, charging impossible interest rates. Desung closed his eyes, feeling a dark, cold aura beginning to swirl deep inside his core. Suddenly, a violent crash echoed from the hallway as the room door was brutally kicked open. 3 burly men covered in gang tattoos strutted into the clean room with arrogant smirks. The leader laughed mockingly, demanding immediate payment while reaching out to grab Desung's mother. Desung's eyes snapped open, blazing with a terrifying cosmic blue light as his system interface chimed loudly. The floating system notification read, "Urgent mission, eradicate the human malice threatening your family." As the thug's hand descended, Desung moves his arm forward at a speed completely invisible to the human eye. A sickening crunch echoed through the space as Desung flawlessly caught the massive man's wrist in a death grip. The gangster screamed in absolute agony as he was instantly brought down to his knees by the unimaginable pressure. The other 2 thugs froze in sheer terror, realizing a monstrous aura was slowly flooding the entire medical facility. Desung slowly stood up from the bed, his tattered gown fluttering as if caught in a violent abyssal wind. He whispered coldly that they would pay for every single tear his mother had shed during his absence. Suddenly, the elevator doors at the end of the hall opened, revealing an even larger squad of armed men arriving. The heavy elevator doors hissed open at the end of the pristine hospital corridor. A massive squad of heavily armed enforcers stepped forward with their weapons raised. Desung's mother shrank back against the wall, her hands trembling violently with fear. The lead thug smirked broadly while tapping a thick iron rod against his leather boots. Desung stepped calmly in front of his mother, shielding her frail body completely. The leader demanded the immediate repayment of an astronomical fraudulent debt. He threatened to tear the entire hospital ward apart if they did not receive the money. Desung slowly lowered his head, feeling the cold familiarity of human malice swirling around him. Suddenly, a glowing blue holographic screen materialized directly before his eyes. The system window issued a mandatory emergency quest to eliminate the immediate threat. A dark, knowing smile crept across Desung's face as he read the system rewards. He silently clicked the acceptance button, confirming the initiation of the mission. An oppressive, suffocating aura instantly erupted from Desung's fragile-looking frame. The lead thug froze mid-stride, suddenly finding it incredibly difficult to draw a single breath. Desung asked them if they truly believed their petty weapons could harm a true survivor of hell. Infuriated by his mockery, 3 large enforcers lunged forward simultaneously with their clubs raised high. Desung did not even bother to flinch as the weapons rushed toward his skull. With a lightning-fast sweep of his bare hand, he shattered all 3 incoming weapons into splinters. The attackers stared blankly at their empty, bleeding hands in absolute disbelief. Before they could retreat, Desung delivered a devastating kick that sent the first thug flying down the hall. The man crashed heavily through the reinforced drywall, leaving a massive gaping hole. Desung grabbed the remaining 2 by their collars and slammed their heads together with sickening force. They collapsed instantly onto the floor, completely unconscious and thoroughly broken. The scarred leader staggered backward, his previous arrogance entirely replaced by sheer terror. Desung slowly advanced on him, each footstep echoing like a death knell in the quiet corridor. The leader pulled out a concealed black handgun, aiming it directly at Desung's chest with shaking hands. He fired 3 rapid shots, the deafening blasts echoing violently off the concrete walls. Desung simply extended his hand, catching all 3 supersonic bullets effortlessly out of midair. He let the flattened pieces of lead drop to the tiled floor with a series of sharp, metallic clinks. The leader let out a high-pitched scream, completely breaking down under the psychological weight of the display. Desung gripped the man by his throat, effortlessly lifting his massive frame high off the ground. He demanded to know exactly who had sent them to harass his family. The leader sputtered out the name of a powerful, corrupt local hunter guild executive. A system notification chimed softly, indicating the emergency quest was officially complete. Desung casually tossed the choking man aside, letting him crash into the rows of plastic waiting chairs. He turned back to his mother, his terrifying aura vanishing instantly into thin air. His mother wept, wrapping her arms tightly around her long-lost son in a warm embrace. Desung promised her that no one in this world would ever dare to hurt them again. He knew he needed to officially enter the hunter rankings to secure absolute legal power and resources. Suddenly, the entire city skyline began to shake violently as a massive, unprecedented black gate opened directly above the central district. Sirens began blaring across the metropolis as an ominous red warning light flashed on every screen. Giant armored draconic wings began to emerge slowly from the swirling depths of the colossal void. Desung narrowed his eyes, recognizing the unmistakable horrific mana signature of an old enemy from the deepest pits of hell. He realized the nightmare he thought he left behind had somehow followed him back to Earth. Desung stood firmly outside the massive steel gates of the Hunter Association headquarters. He placed his palm flat against the cold surface of the magical measurement orb. The crystal orb shattered instantly under the pressure of his overwhelming magical energy. The computerized system immediately generated a golden rank card displaying the highest tier. Without waiting for the stunned officials to speak, he walked directly toward the city's worst unstable portal. He stepped through the shimmering purple rift, ignoring the warning sirens blaring behind him. The portal immediately transported him into a vast, desolate cavern crawling with armored insectoid monsters. Desung drew his cosmic sword, unleashing a shockwave of dark energy that obliterated the front line of beasts. He walked forward at a steady pace while the remaining monsters charged at him frantically. With a single vertical slash, he cleaved a massive boss monster entirely in half. A system screen popped up to announce that the high-rank gate had been cleared solo in record time. The next day, he targeted an even deadlier S-rank gate that appeared in the middle of a ruined mountain range. He descended into the Crimson Portal, instantly feeling an intense gravity that would crush ordinary humans. Armies of undead soldiers rose from the ash, but Desung merely summoned his own dark hellfire aura. The black flames erupted outward, incinerating thousands of enemy combatants in less than a second. He crossed the burning landscape until he reached a monolithic, Gothic-style obsidian palace. He kicked the massive iron throne room doors open with enough force to shatter the hinges. Sitting upon the throne was a massive, heavily armored absolute ruler holding a glowing broadsword. Coiled behind the throne, a fierce red dragon unfurled its wings and let out a deafening roar. Desung smiled faintly, recognizing the familiar scent of high-tier demonic predators. The red dragon unleashed a torrential wave of liquid fire directly at Desung's position. Desung swung his blade upward, creating a vacuum barrier that split the sea of flames cleanly in two. The armored absolute ruler leaped from his throne, bringing his massive broadsword down with cataclysmic weight. Desung blocked the titanic strike with just one hand, his feet embedding into the stone floor. He twisted his wrist, disarming the armored giant and sending the massive weapon spinning into a pillars. The red dragon lunged forward to bite him, but Desung caught its upper jaw with his bare hands. Channeling 80 years of accumulated hell energy, he slammed the entire dragon into the palace floor. The armored ruler attempted to summon dark magic, but Desung closed the distance instantly using speed burst skills. He drove his cosmic sword deep into the center of the absolute ruler's glowing chestplate. The giant ruler dissolved into black ash, leaving only a glowing crown on the shattered stone. The wounded red dragon prepared one final, desperate self-detonating blast of cosmic hellfire. Desung raised his sword to the sky, summoning a massive cosmic blade made of pure stellar energy. He brought the stellar blade down, completely splitting the dragon and the entire dungeon dimension in half. The portal dissolved entirely, returning Desung to the peaceful mountain range on Earth. A massive golden system window announced his official promotion to rank number 1 worldwide hunter. He returned home to find his mother completely healthy and waiting for him with a warm meal. The corrupt organizations that once threatened his family had been entirely dismantled by the legal authorities following his rise. Sitting at the table, Desung realized that his long nightmare of survival was finally over. The human world was safe, his family was protected, and he held the power to ensure it stayed that way forever. With a heart full of peace, the ultimate hunter finally closed his eyes and enjoyed the quiet life he earned.